Can you hear me?
We didn't get that.
I said, can you hear me?
Interrupts again.
Can you hear me?
Let's start it now, babe. Come on.
That actually sounded really good. Welcome to the Peas in Progress podcast. Here, we'll share our experiences as a biracial millennial couple who got married in the South and what we've learned together through the current social and political climate.
All while learning to trust and love one another through what seems to be a life in transition. Welcome to our life.
I'm Brandon.
And I'm amybeth.
Hey friends, just a friendly notice. We want to let you know that this podcast will be adult friendly, including language and subject matter not suitable for younger ears. So if you have headphones, now would be a good time to use them.
Well, hello there, Brandon.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
I think it's just me, you, and the dogs in the room, but
this
is Peas in Progress, like we said. I'm amybeth, and I am a vegan health activist. I'm a LA Talk Radio vegan host on State of the Oceans with Captain Paul Watson and Jana of the Jungle. And I'm also a content curator and just launched a website, which you should go catch on thatveganwife.com. So what about you, Brandon?
Well, my name is Brandon. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, fresh out of the gate as I was just recently licensed. I also am working on my PhD in marriage and family therapy at the University of Louisiana at Monroe. So that's pretty much me. Outside of that, I do some writing, some playing with sports, video games, everything chill, including my lovely lady.
You're so nice and kind. So we've been married for how long?
4.5 years.
Yeah, we got married back in 2014. And so we are here to spread the message of love and connection, and share a little bit about our story and what we're experiencing now, as well as what we've experienced in the past few years, I guess, in this kind of weird social climate that has become popular, which is a lot of, what would you call it? A lot of divisiveness.
Yeah, a lot of divisiveness for sure. And while we'll talk about ourselves, we'll also talk about some current events and just like our ideas and stances on different topics related to mental health, physical health, nutrition, relationships.
We'll also talk about justice and race, and we'll talk about privilege.
Mm-hmm.
It's a buzzword nowadays, isn't it? But today we're going to be kind of laying the foundation for this whole podcast, which is, where are we from and why do we know what we know, and how does our experience allow us to talk about some of these things? And by the way, we're not professionals, but we are professionals in our own way. But we're excited to share this with you guys, and I'm excited to sit next to this guy right here. So, because he's really good to look at. Too bad you can't see him. We're just in our jammies, y'all. So, Brandon, why don't you go first? Talk about your early childhood and a little bit about your middle school and high school time.
Yeah, for sure. I'm willing to give a little highlight reel of my life. Well, it all starts where I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. I am the youngest of three on my mom's side. And I was that kid that you would find in front of the TV watching Wheel of Fortune, mimicking all the sounds. I would be outside or in the backyard playing basketball in our makeshift hoops and stuff like that. And when I was at school, I just loved learning. You would always find me in the classroom raising my hand, volunteering to try the problem on the board. I won every spelling bee or math competition. I remember as a fifth grader, I was like battling second graders for like privileges outside.
What the heck?
Yeah. And I also love helping people too. I was an honor cadet in elementary school, and pretty much you had to get good grades and demonstrate good citizenship. And if you did that for, I think it was like 3 months consecutively, then you got to be an honor cadet. So I was one of those kids, and I thoroughly enjoyed it because I got to skip class.
You still are one of those kids. You're still high achieving.
You know me. Yeah, I think part of that was inspired just by my understanding of my family when I was young. I would always see us all together. Cousins were over at our house. I was over at my cousin's house. We were all just like hanging out and playing and stuff. And you would just always find a lot of our family together at one place. And especially on the weekends when we would all go to grandma's house and we would just all hang out. The adults would be inside playing cards or listening to music and that sort of thing. And all the kids were just outside playing and just having a good time. We were just a family that just enjoyed having a good time. It didn't matter what was going on. And so I think that inspired kind of like the joy that I have for learning and also for helping people as well. So childhood was pretty easy breezy, pretty carefree until all of that was pretty much busted in an instant. This is a story that I, in the past, rarely told people because telling this story, there's the risk of being defined by the story, being seen only through the lens of the story. And I didn't want that to be the case. And now that I've learned that I have more control in how that story is portrayed, but the meaning of it, I've grown to a level to where I can share this. But I remember I was about 11. I was in the back room just playing some video games, and a group of guys that knew my family, they came back there, and I wasn't necessarily sure what was going on with my family up front to where these guys came in, but they essentially took advantage of me sexually, and they each took turns having their way with me. And to this day, there are still times where I legit physically feel that pain. I feel how they're taking advantage of me, and it's one of the most uncomfortable things I continue to experience to this day. And I mean, talk about the obvious ways something like that can impact you. Self-esteem was thrown out of the window. Confidence in myself was thrown out of the window. Innocence, you might as well forget it. And on top of that, this is right around the time where I'm starting to recognize more so than ever that I'm being teased for my gifts. I'm being teased for being smart. I'm being teased for wanting to learn and wanting to do the extra things to get better at things. Like I'm being teased about this all at the same time, like having been taken advantage of. And to throw more burning coals on top of that, there would be times where various family members would be under the influence and would say very hurtful things. Now that I understand, they were projecting their pain on me. They would say things like, "I wish you were dead." And while I knew deep in my heart they didn't mean that, it's still it with being taken advantage of and being bullied in a sense broke me.
Thanks for sharing that. I hate hearing that story, but it is so powerful because you're like one of those people that don't deserve stuff like that. Oof, that's a lot.
I mean, I don't wish that on anyone. I just don't. I mean, to those who have or maybe experiencing it right now, I'm sorry. That's all I can muster right now, but I know what you're going through. And I think this next part, I hope will bring you some hope because my story didn't necessarily end there.
Yeah, things got better.
I transitioned into middle school with all the the bruises and stuff that I can muster. And there came a time where we had to move from the house that I'd known since birth, essentially, because of some stuff that was going on. And I'm not sure if it was related to gang warfare or if it was related to something that someone in my family did. I'm not totally sure, but for whatever reason, we had to leave. And we ended up moving into my grandmother on my dad's side. And my mom essentially became my grandmother's caretaker. And my cousin, who I credit a lot of this to, and at the time, I don't think he knew what he was doing, but I remember when we first moved into grandma's house and we were all there for a weekend, all the kids were outside and all the parents were inside doing adult things. And he pretty much was telling me about this church thing that was down the street from grandma's house. Like, it was literally like a few blocks down. Like, you could practically see it if you stood in the middle of the street, standing away from grandma's house, and decided to check it out, see what it was about. And it turns out it was kind of an after-school program slash vocational Bible school thingy. I'm not exactly sure what the technical name for it was, but during the week they would provide like tutoring and stuff outside of school. So like after school during the evening, they'd provide a meal, do some activities and stuff like that, and then they'd have like a Bible study, and then they'd send you home, and you did that pretty much 2 or 3 times a week. And then on Sundays, they actually held a church service. And I don't know what it was about it, but before going to church was essentially a chore because like we were forced to go, and we went to this specific church and you had to do these specific things. And if you didn't sit in the pew right, it was just like you were going to hell essentially. But this place was like much different than I never experienced, and I was like drawn to it. And I didn't really know why I was drawn to it, but I was. And I found myself wanting to be there as much as I possibly could. And even at a young age, I was volunteering and helping to teach classes, helping to teach some of the Bible's classes to the much younger kids that were there. I was helping to set up the events, tear down the events. I was at every event that you could earn a trip to. I was just there constantly. And not just being exposed to this like new life, this new kind of living, I was also exposed to a new kind of love that I'd heard, but not to this extent. I mean, we're talking about a guy that, contrary to what I've known from my family, loves me despite my flaws, or loves me because of what I'm good at. And that really means a lot to me. And I remember going to camp that year during the summer where my now dad, as we were getting ready to baptize me, asked me one more time, like, do you really want to do this? And I said, yeah. And I got baptized and I came up, and this man showed me so much love in that moment. And all he did was utter the words, "I love you." I mean, no kin to me, no real relation besides the fact that he had been my youth pastor. He had been someone who had shown me a new life, had ushered me to Christ. He said one of the most powerful things that I remember to this day. And I love him and his wife for that. I thank you guys for showing me something new. Well, of course, middle school goes by and I have to go to high school. And the first couple of years were good. I mean, I still, had good grades and stuff like that. I was still helping out with Matt and Melanie, with programs and church and stuff like that.
Matt and Melanie, your mom and dad that you're referring to.
Yes, Matt and Melanie, they are essentially mom and dad number 2. Very important people in my life. If I ever got in trouble, I'd get beatings from a lot of people. So I stay on my game. Anyway, but yeah, the first couple years are good. They were just kind of like status quo in a sense. And there was one particular summer between like my sophomore and junior year, we got this intern. Her name is Jenny Engel. You know who you are. You are a fantastic woman. She was the intern for the summer, and she had saw that I'd practically been at Matt and Melanie's house every day that particular week. And I don't know what possessed her or what provoked her to say something like this, but she was like, why don't you just ask them if you can stay with them for the summer? I mean, you're here anyway. They seem to love you a lot. And I was like, okay. So I asked them, and they were like, fine with us, but you got to make sure your mom agrees with it. And talked to my mom, and of course it was a fight because she didn't want to lose her baby. I get it. I'm your baby. You don't want anything to happen to me, but thankfully, I was able to persuade her, and she allowed me to stay with them for the summer. Little did I know God had other plans, and a summer actually became staying with them pretty much through high school. And essentially, I was able to like step fully into this new life. I mean, I love my mom, I love my family, but I saw that there was something more for me out there, and at a young age, I had to make a decision to do something, as hard as it was. And I definitely got some grief from it, from some people in my family, but ultimately, I don't regret my decision. And
simple as that.
Yeah, simple as that.
Okay.
But high school, learning to live this new life. I'm living with different people, learning different expectations. And let me just say, as an African American living in a Caucasian home, that's a challenge. And I'm sure I'll talk about that in later podcasts, but I just wanted to make that known that that's a challenge. And I had to do that at age 16. So, just saying. Just saying.
That is perspective.
Perspective. But I love my mom and daddy, all of them. I love them. And, it's because I didn't understand it at the time, but like all of these pieces, these abnormal pieces were falling together. And it wasn't even the end of the abnormal pieces. I was able to, with some assistance, gain a full ride scholarship to any college of my choice. Because I had my mom and dad, the second mom and dad, their best friends, who I also consider mom and dad, Todd and Beth Mayberry. Shout out. Then I had plenty of teachers, plenty of instructors, like all circling their wagons to like help me to pretty much have a ticket to anywhere.
It takes a village, huh?
It really does take a village. And so like I don't credit any of my success to just myself or to myself and my wife, but like there's been a village that has held me down from the beginning. And so I thank all of y'all. And because of that, I ended up being the first member of my family to actually go to college.
Which is pretty incredible.
That's pretty incredible.
Nice.
So I think I'm going to pause there because I'm pretty sure they're kind of tired of hearing me and they want to hear your beautiful voice. So why don't you tell us about
my beautiful voice?
Are.
Okay, well, strangely but not strangely enough, I was born on Valentine's Day. My brother likes to say that I get lots of love, so shout out to that little dude, little big dude. So I was born in Central Texas, and I was the firstborn of my family. I was very strong-willed as a little kid. My mom said that I didn't sleep until I was 5, sleep through the night until I was 5. Let me clarify that. And I also remember as a young kid, this is my youngest memory that I remember, was this one and another one, but this one for sure, running away from home because I didn't want pigtails in my hair. My mom was styling my hair and I didn't like it. I remember having my hair styled and like wearing curlers to bed. So shout out to all the young women out there, young millennials who had to deal with that beauty is pain shit. By the way, this podcast is uncensored. So Brandon and I will make sure to make note of that in the beginning. But yes. Anyways, so as I said, born on Valentine's Day. Oldest. I have a younger sister who's 2 years younger than me. And my mom and dad were together. They stayed together, and they're still together now. So that's amazing. I think that my dad said they've been married for 32 years this year. So
yeah, something like that.
But when I was younger, I was really into climbing fences and making goat poop necklaces with my granny and pops. And granny and pops were some pretty amazing people. Pops has since passed on in 2016, but Granny continues to thrive as a young 79-year-old, almost 79-year-old. She's working out and taking charge of her health, so that just speaks volumes to her lifestyle. But anyways, our lifestyle then was centered around cattle and goat sales and exotic animals. I remember growing up on a ranch setting most of my life. We did live in town a few years, but we ended up back out at the ranch a lot. We weren't in town a whole lot, and mom and dad would take us out to Granny and Pops's. And by the great way, this just speaks to like my veganism stuff. Like they always expose me to animals, so I don't know what they thought they were doing. Like somebody who's as compassionate and born on Valentine's Day, who not only gets lots of love, but I do give lots of love. So animals have always been in my path, and we've had all kinds of pets, from lemurs to kangaroos. It's very normal.
She is not kidding, y'all.
It's not normal at all. It's not normal at all when I take somebody out there and they're like, what the hell?
I've held a baby kangaroo. This is not a drill.
But also, we were very Texan. So, like, we were very into our food and into our family and hospitality. So we cooked a lot. We had a lot of meat and dairy. And since my granny and pops at one time were some of the biggest cattle salesmen and saleswomen, because Granny was part of that too. But in like Texas, and I don't know how broad, but I know in Texas there are some of the most well-known people. Pops had a reputation, and still does to this day, even though he's gone. He was an amazing man and had a big impact on a lot of people. So that was kind of how I grew up. I was a ranch girl. We lived in town, and I always craved city things. I was very adventurous. I loved animals, like I said. I also loved four-wheelers and go-karts. And yes, we did make goat poop necklaces. The dry goat poop, by the way, with like feathers that had fallen off of like geese and stuff. They're like really spiritual to me. My granny and I make them.
Y'all are brave people.
But I was also, not only was I a ranch girl, but I was also into dressing up and decorating and being creative. So I was just this like crazy little creative person who had big ideas and always made a big adventure of herself. And I was a very emotional child. I had a lot of feelings about things. And I was very vocal about that. I'm sure my parents will appreciate me saying that. I was not easy to deal with all the time. Let's just say I was very strong-willed, like I said. But I was kind of halted in my tracks because when I was 9 or 10, I remember being in 5th grade. I was diagnosed with scoliosis. If you don't know what scoliosis is, it's where your spine is shaped like an S. They don't know what causes it, but it just happens sometimes. I think looking back now, I see a lot of things that my parents probably didn't know, and just things now like just make sense. But we didn't know what was going on at the time, obviously. And I remember going the first time I was diagnosed, and just like I didn't really know what that meant. I was really young when that was happening, so I was like around your age when you're experiencing your own trauma, which is kind of insane.
For real.
We were experiencing a lot of things at the same time. So my I remember getting a back brace, being fitted for one. And this was at the hospital in Scott and White in Temple, which is a huge hospital, very well known, and very uppity. I would say uppity. But it was a great hospital. So, same hospital I was born in, by the way. So we went there and they fitted me for a back brace. But I remember coming home and I really freaking hated it. Like, I was crying on the couch, and I remember my mom calling my dad, and she was like, I can't do this to her. Like, she hates this. And so my parents literally did whatever they could to make sure that I didn't have to experience this. Because what they told me is that I was going to have to not only wear a back brace for a few years while I was growing, but that I would have to have back surgery no matter what. So no matter what, I was screwed in their eyes, in the hospital's eyes. So my parents did everything that they could and paid out of pocket for me to do a non-surgical program, which consisted of diet, exercise, like strenuous exercise, like stretching, muscle stimulation, going to the chiropractor all the time, and be very specialized chiropractor, not just like a chiropractor who just, adjusts you like Dr. Patty does for us, but like someone who has like a special table, and it was a very elaborate thing. So that was going on during some really important periods of my life where self-worth is being formed. And so we did the non-surgical program. It didn't work out. And so I ended up having surgery, which was a whole week-long event of my life. Gosh. There was also a lot of prep to that. So I was having to give blood to myself weeks in advance. I remember my granny giving blood for me one time because I think I had eaten food or something. And they're like, oh, you can't have food like so many hours before. And so, oh, wow. Yeah, so Granny and I matched. So I have Granny blood. Literally.
I see where you get all your good stuff from.
Yeah, yeah, for real. So there's that. Had surgery. It was very traumatic. I remember waking up screaming at one point because of the painkillers that they were giving me was basically allowing me to not breathe. Like I was having trouble breathing on my own. So ended up having to go to ICU, being on a breathing machine, doing a tons of physical therapy. And I don't stay put for very long. I'm always moving. If you know me, I'm always doing something. I always have a project in my head. I'm always moving forward.
That is very true.
So being in the hospital was very traumatic and very traumatic in the way of keeping me in a place where I couldn't do anything. I remember having a very hard time coming to terms with I could not do the things that other people could do now. So there was a lot of healing that had to happen. This was right around Christmas time. So like there's just a lot of stuff. And it was very hard on everybody because it wasn't just me going through it. It was my whole family going through it. So my little sister and my little brother, I think at the time, they had to deal with it too, and my mom was just like newly pregnant. So there's just a lot of stuff that happened around that time, right during middle school. And I forgot to mention that I also ended up moving schools because I was being made fun of in middle school, at public school. Some kids were calling me the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and then they were all, because my back brace came up, and I always wore like war hoods, so I've always been very self-conscious of myself. I'm always like, I still do this because of this. I'm like pulling at my clothes, like making sure it looks right, and all this other crap that, was just induced during this time in my life where self-worth is being formed, and then these kids are making fun of me. So ended up moving to a private school right before my surgery. So it was a really good time to come to that because I remember walking on my private school campus and just feeling like open-armed. Like there was literally a senior that came and helped me that day, my first day, showed me my classes, my locker. She was amazing. She was a little angel. And her name is Mary, by the way. I don't remember her last name. I think she's married now, but Anyway, so middle school and high school. So afterwards, obviously during that time, it was very traumatic for me. I was very timid, but I was also still like myself at the same time. I was very emotional. There was like things that would make me upset, and like people didn't understand that it would make me upset. So things really shifted for me very young. I had to learn to be responsible very young because of that non-surgical program. I didn't really get to be a kid. So there was a lot of growing up I had to do very early. So, Faith Academy was really great for me. I loved it at the time, and I still do, and I have a great appreciation for my high school. And so I joined the swim team, and that was a big part of my life. It was really hard because I had to like learn how to deal with my back, but also do this physical activity that required my back. But it was also a weightless activity. It was, I was going to go out for softball and that kind of stuff, but like I never did just because, I was told I couldn't run and all those kind of things. So swimming was my release in a way. I had great coaches who worked with me and were very intentional with me. Coach Martha, specifically Coach McAnally, man, they were great. And so, I had these outlets, and I was also very creative, so I was trying to be creative too, and I was encouraged to be creative by my family. But the relationship with my parents was very difficult because like I said, I was a very strong-willed kid, and like I said, I was very emotional. And I was really good at school. I was decent to my teachers, and there were a few times my mouth got me in trouble, but that was just because the teachers were ridiculous. I'm sorry, and my whole family backs me up on this.
They just didn't know.
They just didn't know. They just didn't know what they didn't know. So you just gotta have grace, I guess. Anyways, so I was good at school. I got decent grades. I didn't really like school that much. But being the oldest, a lot was expected of me. And I was also, me and my mom specifically had a very rough relationship. And there was a lot surrounding that, not just on my part, but her part as well. Things that we didn't know what we know now. And so with that came a lot of fights and a lot of yelling and screaming and crying. And I was also just like, with my back stuff, it was just a lot. Like, I just felt like I couldn't win. Like, I was like, couldn't win physically, couldn't win at my home. And I just didn't oftentimes I didn't feel heard. And so, I did have adults in my life that, wanted to help me and were there for me when I asked for it, but it was really hard to ask for it. And I was kind of grown up in this culture of, if you want anything done right, you need to do it yourself. It was very hardworking, very self-satisfactory. We did go to church. I was raised in the church. So we did have moral grounding, and we learned to be very compassionate people. But there was also a lot of like other stuff too that I don't know really how to talk about yet. So maybe we'll get to that in another podcast. But there's just a lot of stuff that I'm learning right now. So this is a very early podcast, and I don't know what P's in Progress is going to be like by the time that you hear this. So, anyways, I was, throughout all those years, I was abandoned by a lot of friends. I had to make a lot of decisions about the people that I wanted to hang out with because the people that I wanted to hang out with weren't very nice or were talking shit behind other people's backs, and like, that's just not the kind of person I am, and I just felt sucked into it. So there was just like a lot of people pleasing because, obviously I have all this stuff going on at home within my health, and so I just want to be able to control stuff, but I couldn't, so I really had to learn how to let things go. And I always really felt different than everybody, and still very much do. But I don't think that's a bad thing anymore. I always felt it was a bad thing when I was younger. But, I'm good. I'm good now. My parents, God bless them souls, they were very strict I felt like in the home. It took a lot to ask to be able to go and hang out with friends. There was always this ask your mom, ask your dad, and then it would take like a week, and then we'd be like, okay, like it's a simple question, like can I go hang out with my friends? Like, I don't know what took so long to make those decisions, and then often it would turn into a fight. I did journal a lot as a kid. I did depend on my friends a lot as a kid, as a high schooler. But a lot of my really close friends didn't go to school with me. I did have good friends in high school, but they weren't like Valerie and Lisa. If you need a Valerie and Lisa in your life. If you don't got one, just so you know, those friends that maybe you took baths together or something, like they were those people that were like family to us. My mom and dad were best friends with their mom and dad growing up as kids, and we stayed close. We were in all each other. Well, I didn't have much of a wedding party, but we were all at each other's weddings. And so, yeah, I think that's where I'm going to end it for high school. I was very ready to leave high school. Transitioning is always difficult for me. It's always emotional, but I was ready to do something new and get out of where I was growing up. So, college.
I think I was more ready to get out of St. Louis than you were more ready to get out of your high school. Just saying. I mean, yeah, I'd gotten a full ride to anywhere, so I applied everywhere. I applied to a lot of colleges, a lot of places. But when we did the college tour and whatnot, I remember going to Abilene Christian University, and it was one of the first times that during a tour and even just talking with the people there that I didn't feel like I was a statistic that was meant to like boost the school standards. Like ACU actually talked to me like a human being. They were curious about who I was. And while at the time I didn't necessarily have the best answers, I knew then that that was a place where I was going to do a lot of growing, not just as far as like education goes, but spiritually as well. So ended up going to ACU. Shout out to my fellow Wildcats. I know the struggle. It is real. You can do it if you haven't done it already. And if you have, don't go back.
Whatever.
But yeah, here I am, first kid in college with no real blueprint of how to do this thing. I'm just out here doing this thing. And I remember the journey there, like Matt and Melanie, they took, or actually reverse. Todd and Beth took me the first leg, and that was fun. And I was handing it off to Matt and Melanie, and they took me the rest of the way, and that was bittersweet. And then suddenly they helped me set up my dorm room, and then we stood outside of Mabee Hall, and then they all said goodbye. And then I turned around, I was like, all right, let's do this. But I mean, I really didn't know who I was. I was talking to anybody and everybody because it felt right to do that, but at the same time, like, what the heck was I doing? And I ran into some good friends. My roommate, EJ Johnson, who is still a really good friend to this day. One of my besties, Vince Tyrone Green II, had to say the full name, otherwise he was going to give me grief. One of my other best friends, Joshua Bonet. It's got some music going, a little plug in there. Other best friend, Brady Robinson, awesome preacher, youth pastor, all-around minister. Also met Dale Akers, who was also one of my best friends, DeMarco Howard.
Are you just giving everybody a shout out right now?
Well, these people are pretty much people. These people, like, they helped to shape who I am today. They were just friends on a different level. We were able to share our hurts and pains and like help each other with it all and teach each other and learn from each other and have fun together and pull all-nighters and mess up on exams. Just like we practically did everything together. And that was also during the time, like I said, I was finding myself. And so I was involved in a lot of different organizations. I remember being a part of like Student African American Brotherhood. I remember being a part of Shades. I remember being an RA for 3 years. I remember being a part of Lene, just like all of these organizations that, in a way, helped to build my character. And so a lot of my college was filled with like character building. But I think the most important thing about the start of my college journey was learning that it was time for me to start healing. Because, like I mentioned before, I'd been traumatized in multiple ways. And while I was forming my character, I was having experiences that I didn't necessarily know what they were at the time. I was having flashbacks and continuously physically and emotionally and mentally experiencing that pain over and over again. And it wasn't like I was intentionally thinking about it. It was just happening. And I found myself isolating a lot. And, you know, while I would put on this mask of like being this social and helpful and benevolent being, on the inside, I was just like crumbling. And I didn't know why I was crumbling. And I was finally introduced to going to therapy. And again, this is something I had no idea what it was. But at this point, I was just like willing to try anything. So I went and was skeptical at first, but man, did I figure some stuff out. I essentially learned that I have PTSD, and while I won't necessarily go too much into it, like I was diagnosed and was taught about what was going on with me. And that eventually allowed me to really prevent myself from going down a really dark place. And especially with having brothers that surrounded me that, while they didn't necessarily understand everything, they wanted to be there. They wanted to help me grow. Like I was able to do well in college, despite being the first one, despite not really having a blueprint. I was able to do well in college. And I eventually, after some trial and error, figured out my calling. I mean, I started off with the biology thing, and
that don't work.
No,
you can't even handle a bug.
No, not at all.
Biology.
I realized that I do not have much regard for things I can't see with the naked eye. So, yeah, I like talking to people. So,
stick with your strengths.
Yeah. So then I transitioned to psychology with kind of a minor in ministry, and that seemed to fit me much better. And man, did things really take off from there. Just with all the involvement on campus, being able to throw on some performances and be able to minister to people in the dorm as an RA. Undergrad was pretty formative for me.
Mm-hmm. Is that it?
For now, because at some point you kind of entered the picture, but I want you to talk about like your early college experience first.
That's true. Okay. Well, initially I chose to go to Lubbock, Texas. There's this Christian school out there. Went out there because I knew a few people because we went to the summer camp with them. LCU hosted summer camps, which was a great ploy to get a lot of students, I feel like. But it was still a great place, and I knew another person that went there, so I started going there mostly on a people-pleasing scholarship because that's what I thought I needed to do. I had actually gotten into Abilene Christian at the same time and was on the road. And
which I did not know until much later.
But you know what? Things work out for a reason, I guess. So started out for education. I don't know why, because I like children, but I don't like 25 children by myself at all times. So I decided to do art education instead, which didn't make any sense, but I was doing that. I don't know why. I really don't know why I chose the education route. I think I just did it because I thought I was supposed to do it, right? And sometimes we just do that as women. Like, that's not to get on a women rant, but I feel like we just do that as women sometimes, which leads me to my next topic of social club or die, because I did choose the social club based on what I thought would be most suitable for me in the long run, not necessarily for the people that I valued. Because actually there was quite a few women, which I lost a little bit of connection with after this, choosing of social clubs and stuff. But I chose another one because I thought it would be better. And it was good. I had a good time. It was stressful, but it was all I did. It felt like it was all I did. But I was also very involved just on campus in general. I had a choir scholarship. I also did student government. I was actually a student government. I don't know if I was like a chair or something, but I think I was something important. I also did I don't know. I just did a lot. I was involved on campus. So, yeah, like I said, I was just very involved with a lot of things, like Brandon was. But I don't know. I still had from a distance, like, wanting to go home, but also wanting to stay with my friends, but also wanting to go back to familiar. So I was, like, very torn between my parents and or where I live. Oh, not my parents, but where I lived, and where I lived or where I lived previously. But then there was an incident at LCU where I felt like I was tricked into telling on myself, basically, because I felt like they targeted me as like, she loves everybody loves her. She's not gonna lie to us, like, this and that, and basically they got me to tell the truth about what happened, which was irrelevant to what happened, like on campus. Like, basically rules were no alcohol on campus, and we were off campus. So, like, they shouldn't have done anything to us anyway, but apparently we were supposed to, like, do community service and go to therapy and write a letter of why we did wait, how am I trying to say this? We had to write a letter about, like, how this situation was wrong and how we'll never do it again. Something like that.
Some bullshit.
But at the same time, I was done with art. The art part of the art education program was over for me as a sophomore in college, and I wasn't done with art. And so my sister was looking at schools at the same time, and so she was looking at ACU, and I was asking her about it, and so I really got involved, and I just got myself involved with looking, and that's where I got this letter of transferring, and it was so random the way that I got it. It was right before I went off to Camp of the Hills to work, so it was in the middle of all that. We'll talk about Camp of the Hills in a minute, because that's where Brandon and I met and became friends. But so after that incident where I just felt, I don't know how to explain that, because I'm not mad. It's just like how it happened was really shitty, and how the after effects of, like, how my relationships with the people that it happened with just went down the toilet very fast, and it was never the same. It was never the same. So I went up to ACU. I was a junior. I was transferring in, and so I went for graphic design and photography, and I absolutely loved it, and I don't regret my decision, because that's all I did. I didn't do any more social club type stuff. I just got involved with my my college church stuff at Beltway, and had a great time with that. It was fun at the time. I had a lot of great friends who really cared about me, and I also my faith grew a lot. Like, who I am as a believer in Christ, like, really grew, and that's something else I kind of wanted to talk about, because I consider myself a very spiritually religious based person. So, like I said, I was raised in the church, but now I would consider myself more spiritual and more in tune with things around me, and the Creator and animals and people, because we're all connected. And so, like, I didn't have much of a faith in Lubbock because I didn't like any of the churches. I'm sorry. And the ones that I did like weren't Church of Christ, but I parents weren't having that. I was told I couldn't go there. But later on, I felt like there's just something more that was missing. So I really came to my own faith, like I said, at ACU after some super spirit-filled mission trips to Dallas. Like, I witnessed things I'd never witnessed before and had been a part of some healings I had never seen before. And, witnessed and heard people talking in tongues and was able to interpret people talking in tongues with accuracy. And it was just very strange. And I would have dreams and visions. I've always kind of had dreams and visions. I feel like I said, I always feel like I'm on this plane of like, I just see things a lot differently than most people in the world. And so, but it's just been the way that God has led me through this whole journey and through, from the time I was born, the time I had scoliosis, to the time I was in high school, to now even, and Camp of the Hills was a big part of that experience too. Working with kids who weren't like me or who didn't come from places like me. And by the way, this little Kiwi snorting, if you hear him, he's just wanting some attention. So that was really hard. And I remember crying over the abuse that I heard about. It was a lot very similar to things that Brandon went through. That I had to face in that time. So I feel like God was preparing me really for you and your story, because it's a lot to handle. And so is mine. Like, I'm not discounting my own story either, but God has just really set this very compassionate path before me. Because that's always who I've been. I'm born on fucking Valentine's Day, y'all. Like,
spreading all the
just gotta spread it. So I feel like that's a good start. There's a few things we do want to talk about our friendship. We'll talk about our friendship a little bit, very briefly, and then kind of close out here. So,
for sure. Well, I didn't necessarily hear about Camp in the Hills until my junior year during the summer. My best friend Josh, he was already working out there, and we had been staying connected and whatnot. And he was like, "Yo, bro, you should come work out at Camp in the Hills. Like, we could really use you, man. And I think you'd be a really good fit out here. I think you'd really enjoy it." And I trusted my friend Josh. I trust his instincts, and so I was like, "Okay, I'll go." And little did I know, I would walk into, what was it, New Zealand?
It was something like that. Yeah,
I think it was New Zealand.
Yeah, it was.
And I saw amybeth. She was sitting next to her best friend. And I remember initially thinking...
No, it was the dining hall.
One of them buildings. Anyway, I just remember initially thinking, oh, she looks cool. Didn't think really much anything else about it. I mean, I was there, and my whole mission was just to serve these kids and to learn how to serve them, learn how to share my story, learn how to hear and help them heal through their stories. Like, that was my whole mission. And so doing that, I got to know some of the other co-counselors and stuff there. And there was one particular day I found myself doing laundry, and lo and behold, amybeth is also doing laundry along with some of our other counselor friends that were there. And she had brought up that she was thinking about transferring, and a few of us, was it a few of us? Or
yeah, it was
a few of us,
you in there anyway.
We were like, oh, we go to ACU, we can, be friends and stuff. Like, you should really come out. And then we were like selling her on the graphic design program and like how
all
awesome that is. And little did I know, I was setting myself up for later in life.
Little did you know.
So, of course, she ends up transferring to ACU, which, hallelujah. But even then, we didn't necessarily really become friends until my good friend Josh, once again, kind of like planted another seed and started watering it. It was like, oh, yo, you and amybeth are really cool. Y'all should start hanging out. I was like, okay, cool. I'll think about it, because young, naive Brandon didn't necessarily understand relationships and what those were. And so that didn't necessarily cross my brain to like dig into that until much later. But anyway, there was one particular event. I mean, I was a part of Shade's Step Squad, and we threw a show, and
let me tell this part.
Oh, okay, my bad.
So there was a shade show, and he was a big part of it because, of course, he was like one of the leaders up there doing the things, dancing and stuff. And I was very impressed. And I remember meeting his family. And then I remember also sending you a lunch text. I said, hey, we should get lunch sometime. And that's when we got lunch at Chick-fil-A at the ACU campus center.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it all started. We should stop there, though, because I don't want to give too much away, because that's a very subtle lead into what we're going to be talking about next time, which is basically how our relationship started and our marriage. So we might be breaking that one up into two if it takes too long. But next time we'll be talking about all the juicy details of how we met. Kiwi's story. Aww, sweet baby. Real life. Anyways, so I'm excited about that one, aren't you?
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So if you like this podcast, by the way, please subscribe to Peas in Progress, because we're always in progress.
Sure,
and we're always changing, so this story could change while we tell it, right? Yeah, it's always changing. And by the way, you should at least let them know that these are snapshots, right, Brandon?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're only giving you kind of the highlight reel of our lives and the most important of details. And so do keep that in mind as we're sharing our lives with you guys. And like my wife said, I mean, these stories can change in an instance as we're learning how to tell our story too. And so we thank you for joining us in that journey and being curious. And our hope is that in listening to us and hearing some things from us, that you too will learn some things, but also begin to learn, some ways in which you can honor your journey. Maybe that's through snapshots and sharing it like we are.
Right. And so if you really want to connect with us, I suggest sending us a DM. You can even send us an email. We have our own email and Instagram.
Because we are totes official.
Right. And so the Instagram is just simply at Peas in Progress. That's Peas in Progress. And then our email is peasinprogress@gmail.com. So if you want to learn more about us, you can find me on That Vegan Wife and thatveganwife.com, and then you can
find me on the Insta as That Bold Outcast. That.bold.outcast. All correct spelling.
I like that you're very specific, because they can't see your mouth, they just have to hear your voice, and hopefully lip reading is not how they, I don't know. Anyways. Are you ready to go Netflix and chill now?
I think it's about time to Netflix and chill. I think
Kiwi is
out.
Kiwi's been ready. He's been chilling.
His bottom teeth are out.
They always out.
I wish y'all could see this.
Okay, you guys. Well, I guess we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Well, hope you enjoyed. Please, if you liked it, subscribe.
Yeah, we said that. But,
Wait, did I miss it?
We just need to make sure that they subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe.
That's where you end it, babe.
Alright, are we gonna go watch Friends or are we gonna watch Black Mirror?
I don't know what I'm in the mood for. Let's just try this one. Bye.
Bye.